You're trash, Grant. A problem someone forgot to take out.
What? Are you gonna throw it away?
The mirrored glass reflected my pale face, as Derek Sloan, the new CEO, held my folder like evidence of a crime. "You're trash, Grant. A problem someone forgot to take out," he said, his voice slicing through the icy air conditioning of the meeting room. The board stared at me in silence, a row of expensive, soulless mannequins, accomplices in the execution. My throat dried up, but indignation pushed the words out. "You're going to throw away the guy who saved 3 campaigns in a row? The guy who avoided a compliance disaster that would have cost a fortune?" I retorted, pointing to the frozen slide on the projector, displaying the data they refused to read. No one blinked. Derek stepped forward, a half-smile on his face. "Saved? You delayed the most expensive campaign of the quarter with your paranoia." He slammed the folder on the table, the sound echoing like a judge's gavel. "Board decision," he announced with rehearsed pleasure. I felt the word fired before I even heard it. The secretary opened the door, an involuntary audience to the massacre. My badge weighed heavy on my chest. I wasn't a name there. I was a number, a login, a signature about to be revoked. "Clear your desk by the end of the day," Derek ordered, already turning away with an air of triumph. I snatched my folder back, my fingers trembling. In the hallway, colleagues averted their eyes as if I carried a disease. On my phone, I watched my corporate email disconnect in real time. Nothing hurts more than watching the end of your story via the company's Wi-Fi. At reception, I handed over the badge like returning shackles, free and humiliated. Outside, Chicago's wind welcomed me with a slap. That day, I swore I would return, and they didn't believe me. Chicago's fine rain streaked my face as I walked without looking back. The city continued its flow, indifferent to my fall. Every horn, every traffic light seemed to mock my paralysis. I tucked the folder under my coat and entered a corner cafe, ordering the strongest thing they had. The barista vaguely recognized me. "Rough day?" he asked. I nodded, a humor that didn't reach my lips. I opened my notebook and stared at the blank screen, the cursor blinking as if counting the seconds of oxygen I had left. I mentally reviewed the campaign they accused me of sabotaging. Every ignored alert, every manipulated spreadsheet, every mitigation route I proposed and that was shelved for convenience. Truth isn't a bird that lands on the shoulder of those who need it. It's a file you learn to protect. A message from an unknown number lit up the screen. "Sorry about what happened." No name, no real empathy. I deleted it without replying. A stage for anonymous people was the last thing I needed. Through the window, I saw a bus pass with a company ad. My slogan, my metric, my invisible signature stamped on the metal. I swallowed hard, the hurt sinking like a stone. If my ideas grew there, they could flourish elsewhere. I called Claire Weston, my war buddy. "You always knew it would end like this," she said after a long silence. "I knew, but I didn't know it would hurt like this." I ordered another coffee and sketched 3 columns in a new file: ideas, resources, people. On the subway, I made a promise. Never again would I ask permission to be right.
When I got home, I created a document called Forge Media Day Zero. Mission: turn truth into competitive advantage. The worst already had a purpose.
The next morning dawned pale and cold, but in the small cafe where I met Claire, the energy was that of someone who had never feared starting over. She handed me a steaming cup and an old laptop. "If they kicked you out, maybe the universe was just pushing you to the right place," she said, with an optimism only true allies have. We spent the day scribbling on napkins, turning anger into action plans. The name came naturally: Forge Media. It wouldn't just be a company. It would be the organized protest of forgotten competence, the response to everyone who had ever been called trash. While Claire sketched a rough logo, I registered the domain and created the social media accounts. Every click, every line of code felt like an act of rebellion. The slogan was direct, a provocation. We turned neglect into spotlight. Claire smiled. They'll regret underestimating us. I replied, feeling a fire that wasn't just from the caffeine. They'll pay to learn what they pretended to ignore. Forge Media was born in improvisation, like a garage band dreaming of filling stadiums. That night, with my heart racing, I made my first LinkedIn post, not as a victim, but as a survivor declaring war. Sometimes what they call trash is exactly what the world needs to evolve. If someone's ever called you useless, stick around. This story's for you. In minutes, notifications exploded. Comments, shares, messages from strangers sharing their own stories. Forge Media had no capital, but it had something more valuable, a purpose that resonated. And purpose, sometimes, pays the most urgent bills of the soul. 3 weeks later, reality knocked on the door. We lived on coffee, hope, and Claire's savings. Bills piled up, and the phone stayed silent. The viral LinkedIn post generated moral support, but no contracts. Doubt began to erode my confidence. We were about to give up when an urgent email arrived. Sender, Tony Maselli. Subject, help, urgent. It was the owner of Tony's Diner, a classic Chicago restaurant on the brink of bankruptcy. I tried everything, kid, but no one comes in here anymore, Tony said, his voice weary on the phone. His story was like many, a family business, crushed by the impersonal competition of big chains. I smiled. Then let's make the whole world want to come back to your table, I replied. We named the campaign Back to the Table. We didn't sell food, we sold nostalgia. We recorded testimonials from old customers, flooded social media with Tony's stories and the smell of his dishes. It was authentic, real, everything Hawthorne & Co. wasn't. In 2 days, the impossible happened. A line formed at the restaurant's door, reservations exploded. Tony called me crying. I haven't seen the place this full since 2008. It was the first brick of my empire. The victory, however, drew the enemy's eye. The next day, Hawthorne & Co. launched an identical campaign, a blatant plagiarism for one of their clients. But the internet, which gave me a voice, also gave me justice. A user compared the two contents, and the farce went viral. The next morning, I woke up to over 100 emails. They were new clients. The man who fired me had just become my best pitch man. Derek Sloan's first strike was silent but lethal. One of our new clients received a proposal from Hawthorne with our own campaign materials, slightly altered. Right after, our social media was flooded with spam reports and our accounts suspended. It was digital guerrilla warfare. They're hunting you, Lucas. They're using their machine to suffocate us, Claire said, concern in her voice. I smiled, a cold smile that didn't reach my eyes. Then it's because we're making noise. Their hate is my first sign of victory. Sloan couldn't stand losing, and his predictability was his greatest weakness. He launched a campaign for a giant client, an exact copy of our strategy, but with millions in ads. Claire wanted to sue. No, I said, looking at the numbers on my monitor, let them spend. While they buy attention, we keep earning trust for free.
The nights grew longer. We suffered cyber attacks, sabotages in shared files, and mysterious calls that hung up as soon as we answered. It was intimidation tactics, designed to exhaust us. But I realized Sloan didn't understand what we were building. Forge Media wasn't just an agency, it was a story people connected with. And true stories always win in the end. Analyzing the data, I discovered something crucial. The IPs orchestrating the attacks and reports all came from the same place, Hawthorne Tower, 32nd floor, the CEO's floor. I noted in my notebook, they're watching me, therefore they are afraid. If Sloan wanted to turn me into a threat, I wouldn't disappoint him. He saw me as trash, I would see him as a business opportunity. His war of resources against my intelligence was just beginning. Amid the chaos of Sloane's attacks, an intriguing email arrived in my inbox. Sender, Ryan Cole, an East Coast investor whose name I only knew from business magazine articles. The subject was short and direct. I admire your courage. Shall we talk? Wary but curious, I accepted the video call. On the other side of the screen, Ryan was the personification of calculated calm. He didn't beat around the bush. You've pissed off the right man, Lucas. I know Derek Sloan very well. He told me that years ago, Sloan destroyed his first startup with the same dirty tactics he was using against me. Now he wanted to return the favor. The coldness in his voice was chilling. Claire, listening beside me, was blunt. This sounds too good to be true. No one offers help for free in this game. Ryan offered heavy investment, access to his tech infrastructure, and most importantly, his network of contacts to scale Forge Media. It was tempting, the weapon we needed to go on the offensive. Even skeptical, I accepted an initial funding round with the condition of retaining full creative and operational control. I don't invest in products, Lucas, he replied with an enigmatic smile. I invest in people with a thirst for revenge, and yours is the most genuine I've seen in years. In the following days, Ryan kept his word. Valuable tips, strategic contacts, and market analyses arrived without him asking for anything in return. He just watched, like a chess master positioning his pieces. One of his messages said, "Sloan still hasn't realized he lost the moment he underestimated you." I realized Forge Media had just leveled up and that I might have just sold my soul to the right ally. Revenge had gained a new and powerful player. The tide turned too fast. With Ryan's investment, Forge Media grew, but success brought new problems. Important contracts disappeared from shared folders. Proposals were sent to clients with gross errors we didn't make. It was internal sabotage. Claire spent the night reviewing access logs and found multiple login attempts from an unauthorized device. Someone's playing on our side of the board, Lucas, and that person has the keys to the castle, she said, her eyes tired. The war had come home. The next day, an old client called furious. He had received an anonymous dossier with proof of our incompetence, including forged emails and distorted financial data. The file was a perfect fake, with my name and digital signature. Someone was studying us from the inside, with unsettling intimacy. I gathered the team, a group of young talents I had hired myself, and announced, "We're under attack. From today on, double-check everything, and if anyone's scared or knows something, now's the time to speak." I saw averted glances and silences that screamed louder than any confession. Distrust settled in like poison. That night, Ryan called me as if sensing the fire. "Don't underestimate Sloan's power to corrupt people. He uses their weaknesses like disposable pieces." I asked for names, but he only offered vague advice, fueling my paranoia. I hung up feeling the betrayal was closer than I imagined. The threat was no longer an enemy army out there. It was a spy dining at my table, smiling and waiting for the right moment to pull the trigger. Trust, the pillar on which I built Forge Media, was broken.
Paranoia consumed me, so I started my own hunt through digital trails. The IPs from the attacks came from two places, the already known Hawthorne Tower and a small co-working space in the West Loop. I went there with Claire, pretending to be a potential client. The receptionist, a bored young man, recognized the photo I showed him, a marketing consultant using our portfolio as his own. We found his office with the door ajar. What we saw inside made my blood run cold. Monitors displayed our client dashboards in real time, and on the desk, stacks of printed internal emails with metadata altered to incriminate me. It was the Sabotage Operations Center. Claire, with trembling hands, photographed everything with her phone. "This is jail time, Lucas," she whispered. For the first time, revenge seemed less a personal matter and more a police case. The line between justice and payback was getting dangerously blurred. Back at the office, heart pounding, I assembled an ironclad dossier with the digital evidence and photos. I sent an encrypted copy to our lawyer and another to a trusted journalist investigating corporate fraud. Ryan replied to my email with a short, dark phrase. "Now you're speaking Sloane's language. Proceed." I was about to blow it all up, to detonate the bomb that would destroy Sloane's reputation forever. But that same night, I received an anonymous message on my secure phone. It was just 3 words: "Look for Lawson." A chill ran down my spine. I cross-referenced the name with our employee files, and my world collapsed. Elliot Lawson, our accounts coordinator hired 6 months ago, a model employee with full access to our most sensitive projects and a history too impeccable to be true. I called him in for a talk at 8 a.m. When he entered the glass room, I saw in the reflection the shadow of Derek Sloan hovering behind me. Elliot Lawson sat across from me, the picture of serenity. He denied everything with the rehearsed calm of the guilty, a script Sloan surely helped him memorize. Only when I placed the photos and access logs on the glass table did his facade crumble. "Sloan offered me a chance, a way out of my debts, that's all it was," he stammered, eyes full of pathetic panic. He was escorted out by security, and I was left alone, staring at my own reflection in the wall that once symbolized my humiliation. Claire, furious, wanted to go to the police, expose everything to the press, and deliver the final blow. "It's our chance, Lucas. Let's end him now." But Ryan, on the other hand, called me with a plea for patience. Exposing now is a small win, an emotional victory. Let him spend more, air more. Let him think he won the battle. The war is ours. I found myself torn between the impulse of anger and the coldness of strategy. I stopped in front of the window, watching the city. Revenge and justice mixed in a dangerous cocktail. Claire entered the room and asked, her voice soft but firm, "What do you really want, Lucas? Destroy Sloan or surpass him?" I replied without looking at her, Chicago's lights blurring with my doubts. "It depends on which of those options he fears more." That night, I made my decision. I wouldn't attack, I would grow. Sloan expected an explosion, a scandal. I would give him something worse, a slow, controlled, inescapable rise. I froze the dossier and went back to work as if nothing had happened. Every new campaign, every client won was a rope I calmly pulled around his neck. The higher he climbed in his own arrogance, the deeper I would make him fall. Revenge would be served, but not hot. It would be served just right. 6 months later, Forge Media was more than an agency. It was a symbol. The biggest brands, tired of Sloan's arrogance and outdated methods, migrated to us in an exodus that the business press called the silent earthquake. In every interview I gave, I answered questions about my inspiration obliquely. I learned from others' mistakes, especially those who believe talent is disposable. It was the most polished way to continue the revenge, a subtle jab in every published article. Success, however, exacted its price. Sleep became a luxury, and trust a calculated risk. The office, once a refuge for rebels, now had the formality of a rising corporation. Claire, overwhelmed, began to pull away. "We're becoming what we hated, Lucas. We're talking metrics, not stories," she said one night before storming out the door. Her words haunted me.
Ryan, my shadowy ally, tried to call me, but his messages sounded more and more like commands. "Don't lose focus. The target is still standing." I realized victory can be a trap when everyone wants a piece of it. Even so, I continued because stopping was accepting the victim role Sloan gave me one day. He lost contracts and investors with every quarterly report, and with every drop of his, my name rose on the leaders to watch lists. Headlines praised us as the future of ethical marketing, and I smiled, knowing that behind that ethics was fire, calculation, and a rage that hadn't yet burned out. I didn't just want to be better than Sloan, I wanted him to know it, every day from every screen, every newspaper, powerless to do anything about it. Claire returned to the office a week later, eyes red and face drawn. Without a word, she placed a USB drive on my desk. "They have something on my brother," she whispered. Her voice choked. The story came in painful fragments. Sloan had uncovered an old gambling debt from her brother and used it as a weapon. The blackmail was simple. Either she leaked Forge Media information or her brother faced serious consequences. She confessed everything, without asking for forgiveness, which hurt more than the betrayal itself. In that moment, I didn't see a traitor, but another of Sloan's victims. I remembered the day they called me trash and understood that justice isn't synonymous with the haste of anger. Leaders who don't know how to forgive collect corpses where they could cultivate loyalty, and I needed living loyalty. I announced a full company audit, not to hunt culprits, but to strengthen our defenses. In the general meeting, I looked at Claire and said aloud, "Failures are inevitable. Hiding them is a pact with the enemy. Learning from them is what defines us." Soon after, Sloan called me, his voice dripping sarcasm. "I hear your house of cards has cracks." I replied with a cold laugh that surprised him. "You confuse cracks with renovations, Derek. My house gets stronger. Yours eventually collapses." I hung up before his ego could contaminate my air. I spent the night redesigning processes, but also remaking promises to myself. Revenge remained my North Star, but the map gained new coordinates. Winning without losing your soul along the way is a different kind of miracle, and I was determined to achieve mine. Ryan showed up at my office unannounced, which was rare. His eyes gleamed with predatory intensity. On the glass desk, he unrolled the final plan. Global Marketing Expo, New York, in 8 weeks. It's the biggest stage in our industry. The idea was to expose Sloan publicly, not with anonymous leaks, but with a frontal assault, broadcast live and censorship proof. He confessed, "I don't want your company, Lucas. I don't care about the money. I want him to feel what I felt when he destroyed my startup, public humiliation." It was pure revenge, stripped of any business pretext, and I accepted my part. We divided tasks like surgeons preparing for a complex operation. Claire, now more loyal than ever, handled securing our data and creating a digital bait to lure Sloan. Ryan would manage the broadcast infrastructure and New York logistics. I took on the most delicate part, curating the evidence and building the narrative that would destroy him. I spent weeks immersed in data, videos, and testimonials, assembling the story of a tyrant's rise and fall. I sent discreet invitations to investigative journalists, clients he had betrayed, and most importantly, market regulators. Revenge is never just about the other. It's about the frame we choose for our own wound, and I was tired of frames that diminished me. On the office whiteboard, I wrote the phrase that would guide our presentation. "We're not here to prove they were right to call us trash. We're here to prove their trash was always the raw material of our empire." The team read it in silence and responded by working even harder. The enemy's clock was finally synced with mine.
In New York, the Global Marketing Expo auditorium pulsed with the energy of thousands of professionals. Backstage, I watched Sloan on a monitor. He posed for photos, smiling with the arrogance of someone who believes his empire is eternal. "When he falls, don't look down, look forward," Claire said, placing her hand on my shoulder. "I won't need to," I replied. Sloan took the stage and began his speech with empty words about ethics, transparency, and innovation. The irony was palpable. Midway through his talk, as planned, my name appeared on the main screen.
The silence in the audience was absolute. I walked on stage, greeted him with a firm handshake, and took the microphone. "Thank you, Derek, for making room for those who believe truth can also be a profitable product." Then the presentation began. On a giant screen, I projected the evidence: the falsified financial reports, the blackmail emails against Claire, the illegal transfers to offshore accounts. The murmur in the audience turned into a roar of indignation. Sloan, pale, tried to grab the microphone, his voice faltering. "You don't understand what you're doing, Grant. This is madness." I replied calmly, so every mic could pick it up. "On the contrary, Derek, this isn't the end of a career. It's the rebirth of everyone you tried to bury." The audience erupted in applause. Security escorted him off the stage amid a chorus of boos. I stood still for a moment, watching my biography rewritten in real time. Victory had a face, sound, and audience. But for the first time, I felt the emptiness and the echo of revenge. I left the stage feeling the weight of the story lift from my shoulders. Outside, New York's wind smelled of freedom and deep exhaustion. The war was over, but peace hadn't arrived yet. In the days following the event, Derek Sloan's name vanished from the media, and Hawthorne & Co.'s stocks plummeted to dust. Investors, once loyal to him, migrated en masse to Forge Media, now seen as the moral force in the market. In the office, champagne flowed freely, and the mood was one of conquest, but I felt like a stranger at my own party. People looked at me with a reverence that unsettled me, as if I were a victorious general, and not just a man who refused to stay broken. Fulfilled revenge isn't peace. It's an anesthesia that eventually wears off, and the pain it hid returns, different, deeper. Claire returned from well-deserved vacation, light and smiling. "You did it, Lucas," she said. "Did what?" I asked, genuinely confused. "Win. And more importantly, win without realizing you no longer needed the victory to feel complete." Her words hit me like a punch. I spent the night in the empty office, reviewing old business plans, looking at numbers that no longer excited me. The hunt was over, and the hunter was purposeless. Ryan, my dark benefactor, sent a short message. "The ground is clear. Time to rebuild what's left, not what was destroyed." He was right. The empire existed, but I wasn't sure I wanted to remain its king. The next morning, I went to the rooftop of our new building and looked at the city. I thought of Sloan, and to my surprise, felt a strange compassion. His defeat didn't free me, it educated me. I no longer wanted to beat him, I wanted to ensure no one like him ever existed again. I sent an email to the entire company with a single line. Our mission from today on is to build, not punish. The responses were of relief and support. I turned off the monitor, letting the morning light flood the room. The city's sounds seemed like a new kind of applause. 6 months later, the acquisition contract for the bankrupt Hawthorne & Co. was on my desk. The purchase was a formality, almost an insult at the ridiculous price. The company that called me trash now belonged to me. I returned to the old building, and the silence in the hallways was that of inevitable change, the smell of dust and failure. I walked to Sloan's old office, the same glass room where I was humiliated. I sat in his leather chair, now mine, and let the memory of that day come with full force. But instead of anger, I felt a mature calm, the serenity of closing a cycle. I looked at the glass and said to my reflection, but also to his ghost, "You were wrong, Derek. The trash wasn't me. It was the system you created, and I was the fire that cleared the ground." Claire entered the room holding the folder with the new unified company logo. "Ready to sign the future?" she asked with a conspiratorial smile. I signed without hesitation. "And now?" she wanted to know. "Now we start over, the right way." I looked out the window and saw Chicago's reflection. The city no longer saw me as a survivor, but as a permanent part of its mirror.
Power changes hands, but character is what sustains it for long. Ryan, my unlikely ally, sent the final message. Mission accomplished. I replied, no, mission evolved. I left the room, leaving the past behind. The same wind from that day blew outside, but now, instead of a slap, it felt like a gentle push forward. That day, years ago, I swore I would return. And they didn't believe me. Today, I no longer needed them to believe. I was the proof.